Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Team Comp Tuesday, the show where every Tuesday we go over different team comp in Genshin. This week we have the standard Xaio team, whereas 2 weeks ago we did the kind of super wonky, weird Dendro Xaio team. Now we're doing kind of what I would consider the most standard and most acceptable build for Xaio. There are a couple swaps that can be made, and I'll talk about them as we go on, but this is the kind of the most budget-friendly and the most accessible variant of Xaio. Xaio is personally the character that I saved all my Primo gems for whenever the game first came out. I didn't roll on a single banner until Xaio came out, so he's a character I have a lot of fondness for, and I've used him basically in the Abyss since launch. And I use him in the overworld quite a bit just because he's a character I really enjoy. But we're going to get to his builds, and we're going to get into the team comp. I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy. Alright, first up, I want to start doing a segment from now on where I actually talk about what the teams are good at in the beginning, so you kind of get an idea of what the different teams are actually good for, and like whether you want to play them. As I realized as flipping through some of the videos that sometimes I didn't do the best explanation of that before like basically the end of the video, so we're going to start that here now. So Xaio is a hypercarry style of unit, meaning he spends most of the time on field for the team, the lion's share of the time due to his long burst. And he also does most of the damage for the team, which means the units that pair well with him are generally units that require low field time and can augment his damage. Xaio, whenever he plunges, essentially does a huge AoE circle damage around him, and this means that he is basically one of the best units in the game for consistent AoE damage. Since his burst lasts almost as long as it's recharged, there's about a second or two downtime where you might have to funnel, but that's not barely a non-issue. But because of this, he has very good consistent AoE damage output, which is very nice for floors with a lot of enemies. He can struggle a little bit in single target, but there is a way to greatly increase his single target, and we'll talk about that mechanic in a little bit. So if you like kind of a fast hypercarry style unit and who mainly uses plunging attacks, then this is the kind of unit for you. He does drain his health a little bit, so he needs a little bit of defensive support compared to some other units, but it's not too bad. Very standard hypercarry stuff. Where he sits kind of power level, or where this team sits power level wise, is this is kind of what I would consider fringe meta, or meta 2 Electric Boogaloo. Whereas like there are teams that are extremely powerful at almost all levels of investment, and then there are teams that can come close to competing with them with high levels of investment, and that's where most of the hypercarries sit. For my money, he's the best of the hypercarries by far, because he offers something that a lot of the other units in the game don't, which is that hyper consistent AoE, large AoE damage, which is something that is relatively unheard of besides himself. There are a couple other teams that excel at that, but it's a little bit more rare than a lot of the other hypercarries, which just do good 3-4 target damage or good nuke damage, and you can kind of just do that with good meta teams. So for my money, he's the best of the hypercarries. Even though he might not necessarily do the most damage of the hypercarries, he has the most unique niche compared to the other hypercarry units in the game. Alright, now I'm going to show you how to greatly increase the single target DPS of your Xaio. It's with a mechanic known as collision plunging. Basically, a lot of enemies in the game, especially bigger ones, have a hitbox that you can hit with the down attack of a plunge that causes a second hit. So for this Ruin Guard, let's see if I can find it real quick, sometimes it's a little hard to find, but you see it there, whenever I plunged on his head and slid down the back, it did a second hit of damage. I'm not really finding it again for some reason. See how that last one did 2 numbers, and so did the like one of the ones in the middle there. If I land on top of him, let's see if I can just funnel energy again, and then show you again. Hopefully it'll look better this time. Come on. Alright, there we go. Alright, do your jump thing. Come on. Alright, let's see if I can show it off better this time. You kind of have to, like, for Rune Guards, you kind of have to land on top of the head and then slam them down. But, yeah, see, there it is. There it is again. There it is again. There it is again. But anyway, you get the point. So, what that is doing is that if you look at normal attacks, there's actually a plunge damage modifier here. And if you collision plunge by hitting whichever part of the enemy's hitbox it is, for certain enemies it's easier, certain enemies it's harder. That Rune Guard is like kind of medium difficulty, but a lot of the, especially bosses and stuff you'll fight in the Abyss, it's relatively easy to find the spot. Stuff like the Golden Wolf Lord, which is in the current Abyss, is very doable with Xaio, just because the hitbox is very easy to find, and there's also a lot of other bosses that have hitboxes that are super easy to find, and a lot of bigger enemies as well that have very easy collision hitboxes, or collision plunge hitboxes. But what that does is that gives you this number on top of your plunge damage, which if you see, this is like 162%, so this is like 40%-ish, we're close to that, of a plunge attack. So it is a very large DPS increase in single target if you can find the spot and do it consistently. This does take quite a bit of practice, and I'm out of practice with it really outside of really large enemies, but it is a very useful technique to know and a very useful technique to get a hang of if you plan on using Xaio for the Abyss and if you want to play him a lot. Alright, now it's time to talk about builds. Let's start off with the Anemo characters on the team, as Xaio does require a lot of energy, so you do need to run a battery unit to funnel particles into him so he can actually burst as often as humanly possible. But let's start off with Xaio himself. Weapon. Any crit rate, crit dam weapon is generally the way to go. I just like Primary Jade Wing is one of the best, if not his best in the slot. It also looks the best with him. Other options include, obviously, any 5-star that has crit rate or crit dam as a substat. Staff, Scarlet, Deathmatch is quite good. Blackcliff if you're free to play. If you have it, this is actually quite good for him. The Missive Wind Splitter. This is actually a pretty good weapon for Xaio if you're free to play, due to the fact that it just gives him attack, and he still likes attack. If you want to, you could use Favonius. It's not that big of a DPS loss, but it still is a DPS loss. I would recommend against it. The sad thing for Xaio is just that there isn't really any craftable spear that's good for him, so if you're free to play, it's kind of like Lithic is also pretty good if you have quite a bit of leeway characters in there, but in general, you're kind of more or less forced into getting a Blackcliff if you're free to play. Because he really does want that crit rate or that crit dam substat, especially if you weren't here to collect the Missive Wind Spitter, which is one of the annoying things about him. Artifacts, you have a lot of options with Xaio. For artifact sets, his best in slot is either the Viridian or the Vermilion Hereafter. Sorry, this set is kind of made for him. This is a pretty good set for him. Another good set is the Desert Pavilion. This set is also actually pretty good for him. You just have to make sure you charge attack to get the bonus, but you just weave a charge attack and go to town. But just right behind that is combinations of any of the 2-piece attack sets and VV, or any of the 2-piece attack sets and another 2-piece attack set. That's personally what I run, as it's generally the easiest to get good substats on, and you'll probably already have a lot of them lying around. You'll probably have a 2-piece good attack set from either farming your emblem domain or farming your bosses for character ascension mats, and you'll probably get a good offensive VV set whenever you're farming for your EM VV sets. So that's personally what I would recommend. For stats, you want either crit rate or crit damage on the circlet, anemo damage on the goblet, and then attack on the sands. I want to real briefly talk about constellations since he is a hypercarry, so a lot of hypercarries get value from their constellations. Yeah, Xaio is basically a C6 or bust kind of character. Basically, all his stuff up until C6 is not super good, and his C6 kit does add a new playstyle, which can be good and really strong in places where it's good, but in general, you don't really need, nor do you really should you go for any of his constellations. C1 can be alright if you want to like just lower his energy requirements, but personally I think you're better off just saving for other characters you enjoy. He will perform perfectly fine for you at C0, and I think at C0, because his constellations are weaker than a lot of the other hypercarry units, it means that his base power feels a little bit better. But yeah, a lot of these are just pretty meh. Like, not on field, he gets extra energy recharge. You want to be him on field all the time. Defense bonus, who cares? The C6 is pretty cool, but even the C3 and the C5 don't actually give him that much damage. So in general, I would avoid constellations on him personally. I would avoid constellations on 5 stars in general. I think they're all pretty bad, except for there's one that I would recommend, and we'll get to that one eventually, and that's the only 5-star in the entire game I would ever tell you to roll a constellation on if you really want to play them. Talents, all of his talents are important, at least in my opinion, so level them all up. If you really don't want to, you don't have to level up his E as much, but it does a lot of damage, so I leveled it up. But if you want to know which one you should go first, base attack is the most important, then ultimate, then, burst, then skill. This is due to the fact that unlike some other units that we've talked about, he doesn't have these attack modifiers in his, burst, so you need to level up his normal attack to get the burst modifiers. Alright, and next up we're going to talk about the anemo battery options. You have a couple, but there's 2 I would recommend. We're going to start with the one that I'm pretty sure most people are going to be using, and then we're going to talk about your other options. So let's talk about Sucrose. Sucrose is kind of the default anemo battery for Xaio, just because she goes a ton of particles to him. For weapons, I would highly recommend Thrilling Tales of the Dragon Slayer on your Sucrose for this kind of team. Artifacts actually don't really matter. You just kind of want to make sure you have an energy recharge sands. But outside of that, so you can burst to pull stuff together for Xaio easier. But besides that, it doesn't necessarily matter what set you're on. Especially because you'll already have both a Noblesse and a Tenacity of the Millith character on the team, most likely, so you won't really need any of that. I think if you really want to, you can maybe look into some of the 4-star sets. Like, I think, is it Exile? Yeah, so you could, if you wanted to, go for an Exile set on Sucrose. This would be pretty decent, as this would also help alleviate some of Zhao's energy recharge requirements. So this is an option if you want to go for it. Talents don't really matter here. You can level up the E and burst if you want, but you're literally just swapping to her to do double E or triple E if you go sac frags. Sorry, sac frags is another weapon option you could have. Double or triple E, and then swapping to Xaio to funnel all those particles into him. And you could also use burst to pull enemies together for Xaio to hit. Good Tenacity of the Millith holder, good grouping, lots of anemo particles, perfectly a good solid option here if you have her, or assuming you have her, and you probably should if you want to play Xaio. And she is kind of the default that I would go to. Now let's talk about the character that I use because I'm spooned. So Farazan is the new anemo like DPS buffer, and she is very, very good for Xaio, although there is a sad, very, very sad stipulation of this. She basically has to be C6. If she's not C6, she will not generate that much energy for herself or for Xaio, and you'll be forced to run a 3rd anemo unit. Now, that might still actually be worth doing, but in general, this is kind of a C6 or bust character. So if you don't have her at C6, I would kind of just pretend she doesn't exist. But for the couple of you who do have her, she will greatly increase your Zhao's damage, because her kit is entirely built around giving crit damage to anemo characters, giving extra bonus damage to anemo characters. For weapons, Favonius Warbow is 100% the way to go. She needs energy. Xao needs energy. This gives particles to both of them. Perfect. None of her stuff really cares about her attack. She does get a little bonus. You do a little bit of bonus damage with whatever skills that scales off her attack, but it's really not worth building towards. It doesn't do that much damage. Artifacts for her. This is wrong, so you want a Millilith set for her, especially if you don't have another Millilith user on the team, but I have another Millilith user on the team, so this is kind of redundant, so I kind of just have her on my extra VV set. But if you wanted to be correct, you can either put her on this set, or again, another good thing would be, I might even consider farming this up now that I've thought about this, but this Exile set, because she wants energy recharge, and giving Xao burst. The problem with this, though, is that obviously you're not actually going to get the entire amount on the character due to how you're going to line up the skill usage. You're probably only going to get like 8 particles, but considering like there's not really that many other sets you actually would care about, this is an option. For the stats, just energy recharge and then crit rate or crit dam and anemo damage on your goblet. She does have a tiny bit of... Where is it here? Oh yeah. Oh yeah, here it is. You get a little bit of normal attack damage here, and it's based on her base attacks. So actually, that doesn't even really matter. So to be completely honest with you, the cup and her circlet don't really matter. So you can kind of just use whatever you want. To be honest with you, I'd probably just use something that has a fat energy recharge substat. Just so you can get her burst back as often as humanly possible. Because again, much like a lot of the characters in this team, you kind of don't really care about her personal damage. You just care about the fact that she gives Xao some of the fattest buffs that you could possibly get. Now for her skills, her burst is the main one you care about, as this one is the one that has the Nemo Res decrease on it. So this is the skill you want to level up. Oh, and this is specifically also why she's good. She's one of the... There's only really like 2 or 3 practical ways to get an emo res shred, and we have 2 of them in this team. There's Traveler, which isn't super consistent, and then there's Gene C4, which is obviously a C4 of a standard banner 5-star, so very hard to get. So this is kind of like the best way for you to get access to relatively consistent an emo res shred outside of Zhongli, who is also on this team. You could also level up the E as well, because her burst does make E's, like her burst does cast her skill with some of her constellations, so you can level this up as well. I will eventually be leveling these up, but the main thing you care about is just getting that initial res decrease. It doesn't go up a ton necessarily with each level, so don't feel pressured to level it up. But yeah, again, Farazan is a super good support for Xao, but you are very much locked into needing her C6 for her to be worthwhile, in my opinion. Alright, now next up let's talk about the Shielder unit. Xao, as he plunges and stuff, is obviously locked in animations, so having a Shielder is a huge benefit for him, as it greatly increases his survivability and your ability to not get shreked. So, the best option is Zhongli if you have him. This is one of the few teams where Zhongli is, like, actually unironically a DPS upgrade most of the time to the team, just due to the fact that he has, much like Farazan, he has a way to shred, where is it? I think it's on here. Yeah, here it is. It shreds elemental and physical resistance by 20%. So this is one of the only other ways for you to get an emo shred in the game that's easily accessible. So because of that, he ends up being a very good unit for this team. Weapons. Favonius Lance is my recommendation, as obviously Xao needs energy, and the more characters that can give Xao more energy, the better. You can obviously roll up with a Black Tassel if you prefer to do so, to make the shield even beefier, but I prefer to have the extra particles going to Xao. Artifacts are pretty simple. Tenacity of the Millith is the way to go with Zhongli. This is basically just his best set and is really easy for him to proc it. You could put him on a different set if you have Farazan running this set. Just make sure one of them has it. Doesn't really matter who. And for sets, you just go HP Circlet, HP Sands, and HP Goblet. HP. Because you're not going to be using the Meteor. The Meteor is a DPS loss. Don't cast the Meteor unless you're using it to dodge animations or there's a specific use for it. If you can, try to grab yourself some crit rate in your substats to get your Favonius Lance to proc. If you have to, run a crit rate circlet to get up near that 30% mark so that your Favonius Lance can proc. It's worth it, even if it means your shield takes a small hit. Now for talents, I would personally, you just really have to level up his E. You don't really have to level up his burst. Like I said, you don't really use the burst for damage. You kind of just use it to dodge mechanics or to like stun enemies if you have to hit them. So just level up the E for that fat shield. Alright, next up, let's talk about the healer in the team. Bennett is your best option, as Bennett's just the best. Gives you a lot of damage and gives you a lot of heals, and because Xiao's ult sucks his health away over time, it's good to have a lot of heals. Weapons, I would recommend either go highest base attack if you want to. If you notice that you don't necessarily have the energy recharge to be able to, like, if you have to delay your rotation a couple seconds, if you're on a super high base attack weapon like Aquila Favonius that doesn't have energy recharge substat, I would maybe look for a weapon with an energy recharge substat. Your best option still being the new Sapwood Blade. I'm just don't really want to spend the resources to craft it and work on it right now, so I use the Festering Desire, but the Sapwood Blade is 100% the way to go. You get it from doing these Sumeru, some of the Sumeru side quests. Just craft it up. You'll get a where they're called prototype for it from the tree in Sumeru, so it's very easy to do, and it is 100% worth making. If you really don't want to, though, you could use something like Favonius, Sacrificial, or Festering, anything with the energy recharge substat. But again, this is only if you feel like you end up having to spend too much time on Bennett getting his burst back up. Otherwise, hit that high base attack weapon. I still sometimes do use my Aquila. Set Noblesse is the way to go. 100% energy recharge on the Sands, either pyro damage or HP on the Goblet, and then either crit rate or pyro damage again on the Circlet. Up to you. Doesn't really matter. Especially in this team, but I always like my Bennett to do a little bit of DPS, you know, the same reason I have an Anemo damage Goblet and a crit rate Circlet on my Farazan. I like to ink just a little bit more damage out of my team, so I personally have the crit rate and pyro damage. But especially because he's, you know, there's not really the option to vaporize here, going for HP is totally fine. In general, though, you want to try to find some energy recharge on your substats. If you can, I probably need to swap my Bennett's artifacts around just to make sure he has more energy recharge so I can go back to running Aquila. But that's neither here nor there. Talents, Burst is really the only one you care about. Level up the Burst. It's great. That's what gives you the attack bonus. So, do it. Level it up. It's good. Not really worth crowning, in my opinion. The bonus ratio does go up by 7%, but oftentimes this is really only a last crown kind of thing, as generally it's better to crown the character's skill itself instead of crowning Bennett's burst. Now, you're saying to me, Gaggle, I don't have Zhongli, my Bennett's on another team. Are there some other options I can choose? Yes, there is. This is because Xiao is very flexible, unlike a lot of the other hypercarries, due to the fact that really, as long as you have an Anemo battery, you just really need some shielding and healing, and any other synergies will be pretty good. So let's talk about one of the other options you can do. So instead of running Zhongli Bennett, you can run Diona Rosaria, or even Layla Rosaria. But the reason this works is, again, you want heals and shields, so Diana or Layla is pretty good. Layla does not have healing though, so you do need to be a little bit careful, but if you want to use her for some reason, be my guest. If you're going to use Diona, Sackbow on her. Favbow also fine to give Xao particles, but Sackbow generally pretty good, as it helps funnel her burst easier. Noblesse, you can put her on Noblesse Oblige, must like Bennett. Pretty decent option here. HP, healing bonus, HP for her. Try to get some energy recharge in those substats. Talents, level up the E and the burst. For your other shielder option, again, you will not have a healer though, so you do need to be careful with Xiao's HP. You can go Layla. Weapons, you want a Fav for her. It's because she heals with HP, but Fav is just pretty good for her because it gives, you know, extra energy to Xiao and stuff like that. Pretty decent. For artifacts, 5-piece Millith is again the way to go, much like Zhongli. And again, much like Zhongli, HP on her. You could also use Noblesse on her instead. If, for example, you're using, let's say, Farazan, then you could use her on... Actually, no. Yeah, you could use her on Noblesse. But generally, she's better with Millith. Diona's better with Noblesse, in my opinion. And then Rosaria is kind of the option you can use in between the two of them, just because she gives a good amount. She can give you some crit rate through her passive here, and she does do decent on-field damage. There also is the Cryo Resonance, which gives you extra crit rate if things have cryo affected to them, which if you have Rosaria and you're actually playing around it, is pretty often. So this actually can be a pretty decent way for you to get a lot of crit rate stats onto your Xiao for free. I personally prefer the Zhongli Bennett variant, but this is surprisingly not as meh as you might originally think due to the fact that it's just... Yeah, the synergy might not be there as much, but you do get like 20% crit rate out of it. Weapons, Deathmatch is good here. Favonius is also pretty good here to give particles to Xiao again. But Deathmatch is just fine here for her damage. For artifacts, I have her on Shimenawa Glad, 2-piece. Any of the 2-piece Cryos is fine. Any of the 2-piece Noblesse is fine. Any of the 2-piece attacks are fine. You don't really want a specific 4-piece. You could put her... If you were going to run Layla with Millith, you could run Rosaria with Noblesse. But if you're going to run Diona with Noblesse, Rosaria can't really run Millith. So that is something to consider if you wanted to. If you're worried about getting both of the Millith and the Noblesse buffs, this is a way to go. You could also theoretically put Noblesse on Sucrose, but it would be a little annoying to burst every rotation. But it is possible. The TLDR is try to squeeze a Noblesse and a Millith in the team at your discretion of which characters are better off with them. But Rosaria is just built for damage, so crit damage or crit rate on the Circlet, cryo damage on the Goblet, and then a attack on the Sands. Talents, E and Burst are the way to go. And just make sure you are getting the behind hit from this to increase her crit rate. So when she presses her ult, increases the crit rate of all the other party members by some of Rosaria's crit rate. So just a way to get an extra, 7, 8, 9% crit rate onto your Xiao, plus the 15 from Resonance. Get extra 24. You do sack some of the buffs. You do sack some of the Omni Shred. You do sack the Bennett buff. It is worse, but it is not as bad as you might originally think, so don't feel bad if you need to do this because you need your Bennett for another team, you don't have Zhongli, anything like that. Also, don't feel bad for just, you could just chuck Layla on in place of Zhongli if you have her and you don't have Zhongli. You'll lose the Omni Shred, but she can run Millith just the same. Her shield's pretty large. She'll do a little bit of damage. Don't feel bad about it. If you want my recommendation, if you don't have Zhongli, but you can use Bennett, go Layla. If you don't have Zhongli and can't use Bennett, go Diona plus Rosaria. Alright, it's time for the rough rotations showcase. This is a very, very easy style to play. Just keep all your buffs up and plunge away. There are some minor things you can do better, for example, let me show you real quick. But Ideally, you want to press E twice on Zhao and then burst so that the particles are flying into your character as the burst is going off. This will greatly help you in funneling your second burst if you need it for the chamber, but sometimes you just won't need it and you'll blow stuff up. But essentially the way it works is that your E doesn't generate particles on Zhao after you have bursted. So if you press both your E's and then burst, the particles will generate and will fly into Zhao, so he will have them going into the next rotation, which is super, super nice. But anyway, yeah, that's the rough rotation. I think that's one of the fastest Masanori kills we've done, but this is one of my better teams. This is my baby. Alright, that is going to be the end of today's episode. I want to thank you so much for coming out. I know this one was a little bit longer, but that's in part because this is a character I know a lot more about. Like, this is a character I've spent years playing, so that's kind of scary to think about. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and if you want to roll for him, I think you should go for it. Yes, he's not the best unit in the game, but he will not disappoint you if you roll for him, if you learn how to collision plunge, if you're willing to put the resources and the time to him. He's not a character that'll make you upset that you rolled for him. And he does have a lot of uses, especially in like events and stuff where there's just like waves and waves of small enemies. You just blow them up. But anyway, thank you so much for coming out. And I hope you have a great day, and good luck if you're rolling on either of the banners. I'll catch you in the next one, which will probably be another Alhaitham video, and then we're going to do another Zhao video, and then another Hu Tao video. And then a Hu Tao video. The Hu Tao video might actually be before the second Zhao video, to line up better with her banner. Let's just double check real quick. Yeah, we have a week until the next one, so it'll probably be Alhaitham. Or it might be Hu Tao, then Alhaitham, then second Zhao team. But anyway, thank you for coming out. Have a great day.